Hello, 2012 Dodge Grand Caravan, and we will do transmission fluid change. So, this vehicle has the dipstick tube, though it does not have the dipstick itself. So I'll try to show you where is the tube and cap. So just over there, just beside the battery, this guy here. And it says for dealer use only. So here's the cap. You just turn it counterclockwise, get it out. In terms of the dipstick, you probably can buy one, but you can make one. So I just use my engine oil dipstick, and I made two marks on the other side. So here's one, and there is the other one. And here's the oil side. So for the transmission fluid, you want to make a mark on 1 centimeter and 4 centimeters. So that will be basically your hot and cold range. So before you drain your fluid, make sure that you check the level. If your transmission is not leaking, is well sealed, just take the measurement of the level and measure how much drain, and basically try to put the same amount back. So I'll just use my dipstick, and if I go from this side into that dipstick tube, and that's the way you want to go, because if you try to go from the front, it doesn't go in well. So basically it went all the way down, and there is like L-shaped plate at the bottom, so it will hit the bottom and then you pull out. When you check the level, make sure that your transmission is hot, so you have a car running for at least 20 minutes, and also it's on idle. Shift all the gears from highest to the lowest, reverse, neutral, put in park, do not shut it down, idle, check the level. So now when we have where the level is supposed to be, we can jack it up so we can get access to the transmission pan. Alright, so I have it jacked up, and the reason why I'm changing fluid is that it has a leak. So this vehicle has almost 150,000 Ks on it, and last time I changed the fluid was roughly 30,000 kilometers ago, though it developed a leak. The first leak that I had was just over here, and it seems like, well, body was leaking, but it was just transmission cooler line on top leaking and dripping all the way down. So if you have a leak at the front, check your transmission cooler lines first. But now I can see that it's leaking on the side, and we will try to remove this cover and get it resealed at the end of the day. Now, first of all, you need to remove transmission pan, and there will be also filter. So filter comes with the gasket. If you don't get the gasket, potentially you can use a silicone or gasket maker, though the gasket is much easier to use since there is always some oil dripping, and that does not work well with the sealants. So we will get started by removing all those bolts around. Alright, so we have our oil tray and also some cupboard underneath. When you removing transmission oil pan, make sure that you have some cupboard underneath, since it doesn't matter how hard you try, there always will be a small spill. So we will start by removing those from this side, and then we will get those loose so it will hinge, and we'll dump majority of the oil hopefully into the pan, not on the floor. But let's get started with the rear ones. Those are just 8mm bolts. So when it comes to the question, how often should you change the transmission fluid, I would strongly recommend doing it every 50,000 Ks of 5 years. So in general, I think, depends of course on the vehicle, but the recommendation is to change 150,000 miles, what is a lot, or every 5 years. So I would strongly recommend going every 5 years. Unless you put more than 50,000 Ks on it, then I would change it at 50,000. Okay, there's another bolt over here. And now we got a shower. So we still have one bolt on this side just to keep it in place while the biggest dump happens. So we get it slowly loosen. That's exactly what I said when I dumped oil on my floor. Okay, so now when my floor spill is cleaned up, we can continue. And that's why I said have some sort of cupboard. It didn't help me well. Need a bigger one. So we will remove the last bolt and we'll lower this pan down and dump the rest of the oil. So I will leave a link in the description to the filter and to the oil, so please check those out. It's nice to do when your transmission is rather hot than cold, since the fluid is less viscous and it drains well. If you have an option to leave this dripping like this for a night, that would be the best, since it might take a while to drain that fluid. But now when you remove this oil pan, there is a magnet and you want to check for any shavings, big chunks, stuff like that. So there is lots of shavings on this, but nothing major that I can feel. We'll just get that cleaned and put it back in place. And for the next step, as I said, we will let it drain and I will take the stock cover off. Okay, while that is draining, I will remove this cover and remove my tray. So we'll do the same thing. We'll start at the bottom where it will drain the most, and there is this plate, so we'll get that saved, and we'll do the rest. So I don't have a gasket for this one, so I'll be using RTV silicone gasket maker to get this sealed, and it looks like that's the material that was used before. So I'm not sure if it's factory sealed, but I've seen lots and lots of transmissions on Chrysler vehicles that have been sealed with the silicone from the factory. So now we get to the few spots where we will probably need to use ratchet to go behind the fender well. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 more bolts. So we'll just use 1/4" ratchet and we'll do it by hand. Okay, so now when all the bolts are removed, just try to come with the small flat screwdriver and we'll try to break that seal. We don't want to bend this cover, so we need to go slowly, let it come loose. That silicone holds well, so you need to be patient not to break this plastic cover. Okay, I will actually try to work my way through with the putty knife, since it's thinner and it can cut through that sealant. So I will just go like that all the way around to get that cover loose. So just by cutting through with the putty knife works quite well. So now we can get it off. Great work, guys. So now with the combination of the putty knife and the razor blade, we'll just go around and make sure that we clean off all the old sealant. And you want to make sure that when you do this, nothing gets inside the transmission. So if there are pieces, make sure that you got them out and don't leave them in, since it can create lots and lots of issues down the road. Okay, let me get that cleaned. Alrighty, so I have cleaned the surface on the transmission. So now I will move to the cover. So here's the side cover, and there's lots and lots of silicone to be removed. The transmission pan, there are just a few spots where I used to catch the gasket, so it doesn't move too much when I install it, but we will get those both clean too. Okay, so now when the both covers are nice and clean, what we want to do, take the bolts and get all that extra silicone removed from the tip of the bolt, since there's some old silicone, and when we apply a fresh one, some will get on those bolts. So you can see there's silicone on each bolt basically, so we want to make sure that that is nice and clean, since those holes are not, most likely are not through holes, so there's just so much room inside, and if we have a couple of layers of silicone, that can cause bolt over tighten and strip the thread. Next, I'll remove the filter. So it's T20 Torx. So one over there, one over here. Now I'll just wiggle it out. There might be another dump of fluid. There's quite a bit in the filter itself. So here's the new filter. That's Wix, and I will leave a link in the description. So it comes with the gasket, and also it comes with this seal. So this goes into transmission, and I won't be changing it, to be honest. I don't want to mess up with the transmission, but if your old filter was not tight enough over here, it just fall off, probably worth replacing it. But I will just leave the old one. In my case, it was still quite tight. Okay, so let's get the filter in. This is the plate where the dipstick goes. So if you ever wonder, this is kind of where it hits, so you need to go all the way down. So we will just push in the new filter, and going back to the seal, you can see that it's still quite tight. And now we just need to place those two bolts in, those Torx T20 screws, bolts. So one, just get it started. And I also cleaned the surface where the gasket goes. Before I install the filter, it is a little bit easier when the filter is not there. We'll get that and this one in. Good. So I have applied just a few droplets of RTV silicone on the pan, so the gasket stays in place when we put it back on the car. So we just to keep it in place while we trying to bolt it to the transmission. It's a bit too much. As well as you can put a few bolts here and there. So the bolts most likely won't stay in place. Exactly what's happening. So those tiny bit of silicone will hold it in place long enough until you start your bolts. Okay, now is a really critical step, and it will depend if your gasket will leak or not. You want to make sure that there is no oil on the surface, so I sprayed it with the brake clean, because you want the gasket go against bare metal, not against oil. If it goes against oil, most likely that you will have a leak earlier or later. So it's quite important to get this tight before you get the oil at that kind of bottom part. So we are not torquing it yet. We just starting the bolts and make them snug so no oil can get in between the gasket and the, of course, one is in the oil and transmission oil. Okay, so now we will torque it. I found torque spec 10 foot-pound, which is 120 inch-pounds. I think it's a little bit overkill, so I'll do 100 inch-pounds. And I will just move from the back. Just a disclaimer, I'm not 100% sure what is the service manual calling for, but just move from the back and to the front with 100 inch-pounds torque, which I think is more than enough. So now we do this one. Do this one. So if you guys have a service bulletin with the exact torques, please share it in the comments. It will be super helpful to the next person who is doing this. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, but I can see that the rubber gasket is kind of getting squeezed and pushed out a bit. So that's another indicator that doesn't need any more torque. So next we will use some RTV for my gasket maker silicone. And the trick here is that you need to go around all the holes. So let's start from here. Since in many cases the bolts themselves can let the oil out if there is a through hole. So you need to make sure that when you do this, you go around your holes all the time. And you don't need too much silicone. This sticks directly to that metal surface, so we don't worry too much about getting a good seal, as long as you have your silicone all the way along the perimeter and around the holes. If you put too much, there is a chance that it will get inside the transmission exactly as it was before. So too much is not good either. And just continue doing it until we have a closed loop all the way around. And also for that purpose, just in case if somebody gets too far into the transmission, we won't fill it with transmission fluid right away. We will let it sit for a couple of hours so it hardens. And even if the transmission fluid gets in contact with the silicone, it will be already hard and it will not mix with the fluid with transmission oil. And I think this might be a little bit too far in this corner. Okay, all right, let's get under the vehicle. Okay, so trick here is the same as with transmission oil pan, to get this as clean as possible before we put it in. And you can push some paper towel inside just to remove any oil that might be sitting there. So now we just try to put it in right where it's supposed to be with the first try, just like that. And we will again start with the bottom bolts, since we want that part to get sealed as soon as possible. And that's exactly where it was leaking before. So with the RTV silicone like this, basically you want to go a finger tight, might be a bad description, but you don't want to squeeze it too much right away. So if you just go tight enough that the cover is touching the transmission, then we would leave it for an hour or so for that silicone to shape itself, dry out a bit, get hard, and then we will torque it. So we will basically kind of form that gasket in between, and when that gasket is formed after an hour or so, we will torque it and squeeze it a bit, similar what we do with regular gasket. Though considering that at the very bottom there is always fluid seeping out, we had to get it more than finger tight. So, but for the rest, I will got those just slightly tight, not to 10 or 100 inch-pounds. What it would be the torque spec, and when the sealant is getting harder, we'll come back and we'll torque it. So at this point, I will just get it in contact so the silicone has a place to dry and form the shape. So while the silicone is drying, I have measured how much transmission fluid I got out, and this is 4-liter jug. Over here it's full, and also I lost some when I spilled on the floor, so there should be approximately 5 liters of fresh fluid, and I have here 5 liters, or actually 5 quarts of Castrol Transmax ATF plus 4. So Castrol Transmax, and Chrysler vehicle calls for ATF plus 4. It's specific for Chrysler, so make sure that you get ATF plus 4. So I'll start with 4 liters, then we'll get it level, get it hot, and we'll top it up to the desired level. Under the hood, I'm using the funnel with the hose, and you can see that it's going down to this dipstick tube, so that is waiting for the silicone to dry. It's been just over an hour, and the silicone on where it came off, it's getting hardened. So we will just torque everything to 100 inch-pounds, moving from the bottom to the top. And now when our silicone has formed a gasket, we are basically squeezing it, same as we've done with the transmission oil pan, where we have actual rubber gasket. We need a little extension over there, so I'll get it torqued. So the vehicle is back on the ground on a leveled surface. So right now I'll just put 4 liters of ATF plus 4. After that I'll start the vehicle, warm it up, and let it run for roughly 15-20 minutes to get it to the normal operating temperature, and we'll check the level. So having the vehicle running for more than 20 minutes and checking the level a few times, I ended up putting in 6 quarts of fluid, and that's got me to the point where I want to be. So this will conclude the transmission fluid and a filter change on 2012 Dodge Grand Caravan, as well as fixing the leak from the side cover of the transmission. Please check links in the description to the video to the parts and fluids that you might need. Like and subscribe, and as always, do it yourself. Thanks for watching, guys.